The International Lounge Podcast is your passport to world culture. Join your hosts as they dive deep into the ancient and modern history of different countries in each episode. Laugh along with special guest comedians as they explore the 4 F's of cultural survival: film, fiction, food, and funk. So, put your tray tables down for a hilarious ride through time. Subscribe to International Lounge on your favorite podcast platform today.
This is Bad First Impression, a podcast about movies and where you meet them. I'm your host, Devin Warner, and this week is a guest choice episode. Last time you were on, Bobby, we talked about movies that you might want to cover if you came back. And Meet the Feebles was ready on, I had barely finished getting the sentence out before you're like, Meet the Feebles, you wanted to talk about that.
I need this film to be seen by more people so others can go through the trauma I went through watching it. And I think it's just an experience anyone our age just has to have. I don't know why, but it's just...
What about our age makes you think that this is a vital movie?
I feel like if you are kind of like the next generation up, I don't think it hits as hard as the way we joke about in
the way that your dad, not your dad, but the royal your dad, has no patience for your bullshit.
Exactly. I don't think this is a movie for them.
No,
even though it came out for around the time for them. It wouldn't be. I feel like maybe the generation after us will enjoy it, but I feel like we're in that sweet spot where we went from practical effects and puppetry more kind of in the zeitgeist to that kind of disappearing. But we were at the end of it where it was a lot more fun because there was more stuff going on in general with effects and budgets for movies. So we saw Jurassic Park we grew up watching, stuff where these big practical effects are happening. And then at the same time, we grew up in a very kind of cynical society that will laugh harder at tragedy than I feel like certain other generations will.
Yeah, I think, but I think that this manifests in different ways through different generations. As evidenced by the existence of this movie, the name of which I've actually not yet said.
Oh, that's true. Let's introduce the movie.
The thing is that I was we should get down to business. We should introduce everything. So I introduced the podcast. I did not introduce you, and I did not introduce the movie.
We should introduce the director first to see if people who are listening along, we'll make a little game. We'll see if they can guess the film by the time we get to the name of it.
People who are listening along but did not look at the name of the episode before letting it autoplay on their playlist.
Exactly.
So we're talking about the second film by director Peter Jackson,
famed director for Lord of the Rings.
You might know him.
This film, I will say, from what I read and what I've heard, this film went a long way in helping him become the director of Lord of the Rings, just because of the way he does effects and the way he creates believable characters out of inanimate objects.
Yes, I'll say, throw out taste or commercial viability or a basic sense of trying to appeal to really anybody at all. This movie does demonstrate a real aptitude for making non-human things work within a human world.
Yeah, the fact that there is not you'll watch a Muppet movie and you'll see humans in the background. You'll see them interacting in society. Happy Time Murders is all about Muppet, puppets and humans living together. I think this is one of those films in this area where there's you don't see a single real human. The whole society is just puppets, and it blends in so nicely into what's going on that you don't think they feel out of place or it's a mixture of worlds. It just feels they belong here.
Yeah, no, in fact, it kind of makes it a little bit, if anything, start to feel a little bit more natural. Yeah. Watching all of these non-human characters engaging in very human behaviors. Whereas normally, in a Muppets movie, for example, which is obviously directly homaging and cribbing from, when you see them interact with a human character, you are oh, okay, this is grounding this a little bit. This kind of achieves a similar effect by going the opposite route of saying like, well, you've seen enough rats doing blow that obviously it's just natural for them to do it. We are, of course, talking about the 1989 film Meet the Feebles.
And if we could really quick, because I don't think there's any copyright on this, just throw in the theme real quick right here. Just
sure. What the theme to the movie?
Meet the Feebles. Meet the Feebles.
Okay. Now you have to cut off. I actually don't know. Like, I don't know if YouTube's algorithm is going to pick up.
One of the catchiest pieces of music I've heard in a while. Because it's very well done for what's supposed to be a ripoff of The Muppet Show.
What's funny about it is that the rest of the movie, I guess you could kind of call it a satire. I think it is just in that very juvenile way, just trying to be as offensive as possible to no real aim.
Yeah.
You know, there are references to the kind of corruptness of show business in this movie, but I wouldn't really call them commentary so much as they are acknowledgement of tropes from stories about corruptness in Hollywood.
It felt like a caricature of what a variety show was in like the real world versus what's portrayed. Because basically the setup of the film is very, very equal to how they set up an episode of The Muppet Show. You have a variety show going on, and in between each act, you have the background drama being the through line of the plot.
Yes.
And you go back and forth between what's on stage and what like problems Kermit or Fozzie or Gonzo are facing. And it takes that basic premise of like back and forth between the show and the background drama and just extends it out, and then inserts everything they could think of that you'd see on like modern day Adult Swim.
It does. Adult Swim is a great kind of touching point for this sort of thing, because obviously I think this precedes the existence of Adult Swim.
Oh yeah.
89 definitely is before, you know, that sort of like late cable channeled access sort of thing would kind of proliferate. But it's, like I said, it's just kind of like, it's a lot of the stuff that's in there is there just because somebody thought it would be upsetting to see a puppet do this sort of thing.
Or just funny. Like, because it basically, I think Peter Jackson at this point must have been in his like 20s, 30s.
It is very clearly made by a young man.
Yeah, yes, it's very much just a bunch of younger guys fucking around and be like, this is the funniest shit I've ever seen.
I cannot picture a 45-year-old man thinking up some of the stuff in this movie and being like, wouldn't that be like really funny? Like if we saw like a cat otter tit for a second, that would be like, we're really pushing the edge, man. And I can appreciate like a juvenile sense of humor. Like I do like that some of the time. I'll say, while I'm really glad I've seen this movie. It's kind of been on my like long list for a long time. And it's a great reference point for somebody who like kind of wants to see like where the guy who made the Lord of the Rings came from.
Yeah.
Right. And it's funny that you bring up that this helped him get his job, because I look at this and almost think, I don't think of the people who are in charge of hiring as being that perceptive. That they will see something like this that is on a craft level, incredibly well done, but obviously doesn't have any commercial appeal of its own, and saying, I can harness that and make him do something normal with it. I oftentimes don't want to credit like a studio exec for being smart enough to like see kind of through all the puppetry and say, okay, but we could get him to make like a real, actual popular thing. All that being said, I think this is like a oftentimes really funny movie. I don't know that I can say I love it to the degree that you do.
I will say I don't. The way I say it is, I don't think it's an amazing movie. I don't think it's a good movie. I don't think it is perfect all the way through. I just think it's a good, fun, amazing experience. I love out of everything, I love the experience of watching the film more than I love the film.
Sitting and watching it with you was a real delight. Just kind of letting this thing wash over you. It's always fun to kind of like realize that this thing actually exists.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like, I've always heard of Meet the Feebles. I've seen the poster. I've read synopses before. To actually witness the thing and be like, oh no, this isn't like a joke that all of society has been playing on me. This thing exists. You can watch it and it's there for 95 minutes.
Yeah.
probably, like, in my opinion, like if it were like 15 minutes less, I would probably enjoy it a lot more, just because it does start to, I get this with a lot of movies that I really like. I hit the 80-90% and I'm like, I think I'm done. And I would love if this could also be done. Like Poor Things was a movie I felt this way about recently, that I got to that point and I was like, I think you've made all the points you're going to make. I don't think the extra 20 to 30 minutes that I see on my runtime here are going to like make new points or find ways to drive home the old points. I don't know. I'm surprised to hear you say you don't think this is a good movie, honestly.
I think just like you don't take away a lot from the film except for like, what the fuck did I watch?
You're right. It's
very much like, it's just made to be entertainment, dirty, fun entertainment.
Yes.
I do think because it's from, not to give it excuses, but it is from like a different time. So there's a lot of stuff that's kind of like hard and cringy to watch.
This is always, I think, kind of like worth addressing whenever we talk about something that's a slightly older film. There are a couple elements in here that I think would not fly today.
Yeah.
In general, it's like things that you're like are obviously just interwoven into the superstructure of the movie. Like for example, like less than great attitude towards like women and female characters in general. I wouldn't really call this a super empowering movie.
No, the movie is very homophobic, racist, and misogynist.
Yes.
But it throws out slurs. The character or the caricatures of some depictions are very much like,
yes.
It's like you can be like,
yes.
Oh.
Yes, there's one sequence that has like some really like, yes, racial caricatures as puppets. And I'll say though, we haven't talked about the structure of this movie at all, which is like, it's basically like they set it up and it's an anthology of different stories thrown together. I'll say though, what's so conflicting is those really racist puppets, I think, do actually have one really great joke that is not actually related to how racist the puppets are, which makes it so jarring that I'm sitting there, I'm like, this bit is great.
Should we talk about the sequence before we?
Yes, let's lay some groundwork, because I think that there's I think there's, an overwhelmingly likely chance most people are not going to watch this movie.
Yeah.
Before I go into that on the subject, is this a movie you'd really recommend most people watching?
What I would recommend is, if you're kind of into like the Adult Swim type of content, if you like kind of like that edgier kind of stuff, and it's
a little edgelordy. That is kind of, it's proto-edgelord.
Yeah,
is how
exactly.
I would maybe describe this.
If you're like enjoy that type of humor, it's definitely up your alley. If you're someone because I always recommend you take an edible, and you have to. I don't think it's a movie you watch alone. You take an edible, or you have some drinks. Maybe make it into like a drinking game, something where there's like camaraderie around it. I think it's a good, fun group hangout film, because it's very good. The best part of it is the reactions you get from others and the reactions you have as a group to what's happening on the screen. Because I think that not only is it very like bonding to sit there and be like, what the fuck is going on together? It's just, there's so much being thrown at you so quickly. Like, some of the bits just come fully out of left field, that it's hard not to enjoy the roller coaster you're going on. Yes.
I think what you're referring to is the idea of this being like a communal experience is a lot of like what I originally kind of set out to explore with this show, right? The idea that like you go, and a movie is more than just the text of what the thing is.
Yeah.
It's the context and the experience in which you take it in, and what you bring to it when you sit down and watch it.
Like, I don't think I'd enjoy the film as much if I watched it by myself for the first time.
I
don't
that's
think
weird.
We'd be watching it
aberrant
today.
Behavior. I think that's strange to do.
I
think if you told me, now that I've seen it, if you said, if I texted you a week from today and said, hey, Bobby, what you up to this morning? And you said, watched Meet the Feebles again, I'd be really worried about you.
Yeah. It was like the same as you. I'd heard about it. I had like inklings of what it was. As someone who's like a big Muppet fan. For those at home who are just listening audioly, I'm wearing a badass audioly. I'm wearing a badass hoodie with Kermit the Frog on it.
Yes. And while we're on the subject of Bobby and Muppets, on your last appearance, we had a poll.
Oh yes, we have to address this.
Based off the result of which we decided to promise absolutely nothing. We won't. Yes. We will take zero action except for, I guess, addressing it here
and psychological damage to deal with my therapist.
So we asked, is Bobby a Muppet boy
or Muppet boy Bobby,
or are you Muppet boy Bobby? It doesn't really matter that I actually can't remember the exact wording of it because the results of the poll were exactly 50-50.
And I think we had, not to boast about the numbers, I think we had 14 voters.
Yeah, we had
more than I expected.
Literally in the tens of voters. Technically, more 11 and up is tens. So we had lots of people interested, invested in what was going on.
And I didn't see the analytics, but I would believe that it is a very diverse group and not just people who we are friends with that decided why not.
People who've been on this podcast before, not significant others of people who've been on this podcast before, people who are just engaging in it.
Not me voting on 2 accounts.
Yeah, no, it's not. I didn't do that either. It's nothing like that. So I don't know what we're gonna do with the result of that poll.
Well, I would like to say that.
Do you have a pitch? Cool.
Going forward, I'd like to be addressed as Muppet Boy Bobby.
Muppet Boy Bobby. You gonna change your social media handles to Muppet Boy Bobby?
No.
Okay. So
that's just
in what context?
Whatever context you feel like. You can call me Bobby for short, but that's gonna be my long official name. Muppet Boy Bobby William Martin.
Muppet Boy Bobby William Martin. So do with that what you will. Or more likely don't, because I'm not going to. Anyway, so the plot of the film Meet the Feebles is basically, yes, they are setting up a kind of Muppets-esque show.
Yeah, they're doing their first live variety show.
And it's like a comedy variety hour starring a bunch of kind of disparate acts who do these kind of, like this very old-fashioned. The Muppets, it's funny that they're a reference to a thing, and now those are the primary reference that people, when they're trying to think of that era, the Muppets, who are a parody of it, are now the shorthand for this type of variety show we're trying to explain. But the main star of it is a hippo named what's her name? You know,
Heidi
the hippo.
She's very much a Miss Piggy-esque.
Yeah, she's very.
And I have worked out in my head who everyone I think is supposed to be.
I think that most of these have pretty clear analogs. There's one or two that I'd have to ask you.
Yeah,
she's your kind of Miss Piggy-esque type. She's a singer. There is. What's the old frog's name? The Vietnam vet.
Oh, I cannot remember his name.
Okay. Well, let's see here. We have
he is
8 Ball is his name.
No, that's one of his compatriots.
Okay.
He's the one that ends up on when they're going through the bushes coming back from him. He's like, 8 Ball. Oh, there you are. We were so worried that you've been caught.
Yes.
And then they push the bushes back for the big reveal. I don't want to discuss exactly what the sequence is yet, because I feel like that's going to be a conversation in itself.
Yes.
He's the knife thrower of the show.
He throws knives at somebody who is on like a spinning wheel. Like that's the thing, is we're getting into like magicians and carnival performances.
He gives me the vibe that he's the Gonzo ripoff of like the stuntman of the show.
Yeah. I think he's
some
also,
Gonzo elements went to another character as well, but
he is he's like a Vietnam vet, like with a drug addiction.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that he is a frog who spends most of the time begging people for money for drugs, and like collapsed in a puddle of his own filth, I do think is supposed to directly allude to like, we're perverting the idea of Kermit a little bit, right? Like I think that's very intentional. We have the manager who's Mr. Bletch.
Yeah.
Is a walrus. I don't know what he's an analog for.
I think he's just an analog for like Hollywood. I think he's supposed to be
there's like a little Sam Eagle in him, maybe.
Mainly because Sam Eagle really was just like, he was almost like the pure opposite. Where
Yeah.
Sam Eagle, he didn't actually have a role in the show. He was just there to be like
just in that he's a
the
person
American
of authority.
purity. He was supposed to be like the Ronald Reagan propaganda machine.
He has kind of I kept hearing it. It's not a one-for-one match. His voice is kind of like Peter Cullen's voice for Optimus Prime.
Yeah.
Is what he sounds like.
Which is so funny. I actually went to a screening of the first 4 episodes of the original Transformers series like 2 days ago.
Oh, it wasn't Transformers the movie
no, I got very confused. I thought it was the movie with Orson Welles. It was just the first 4 episodes being screened. And the first one, which was interesting, this is getting off topic, but it was really cool. The first episode, they had all the living voice actors and then all the new voice actors who replaced the ones who passed on like the side of the screen, and they were in a big circle performing it as you watch the animation on the screen.
Oh, that's cool.
It was really cool. So I was actually sitting watching him perform Optimus Prime for like 15 to 20 minutes.
You recently saw Peter Cullen. It's like you can confirm after having watched him do it in person that you're like, oh, okay, there are. I can see that voice out
of Bletch.
Yes, yeah, he is the kind of philandering. I guess he's the producer, but he's also kind of the money guy. He's got a little bit of like a mob boss energy to him as like the show goes on. The other probably biggest player is Trevor, who is a rat who produces.
He's like the second hand, because Mr. Bletch is also like a mobster, so he's like the second in command.
Yeah, so he's kind of his second in command, but he's also shooting pornos in the basement.
Yeah, because basically Mr. Bletch, he sells drugs, guns, and porn.
Yes.
And he does it all from the theater that the whole show
he's managing the show in. It's so funny that he's like, we're going to be like superstars when the show does well initially during its premiere later in the night. I'm like, were you not making enough money off the porn racket, the drug racket, and the gun racket? You needed to go legitimate with a children's variety hour as well. Trevor his voice really reminds me of the kind of parody of Peter Lorre that would air on the Looney Tunes. You know the one I'm talking about. The guy it's kind of like an Igor voice. But I said this to you while we were watching it. He reminds me of the Muppet Uncle Deadly. Just in his like layout, and then also he's kind of a flunky a little bit.
Yeah, and he has that creepy kind of look with like the narrow stare and the full on like you could tell like his eyes have like the whites to them, but they're barely there. So they're mainly just like black pupils staring at, because he's a rat. He's very much like, he looks like the unsettling image of a rat you'd see in like a horror store around Halloween and decorations.
Yeah.
It's supposed to, I think his look is heavily meant to unsettle you, because everything he does on screen is very like unsettling.
He actually predates the existence of Uncle Deadly, I think. Uncle Deadly, I believe, was invented for the Jason Segel reboot of the Muppets.
Uncle Deadly was in the original series. He just became more of a character in the 90s to early 2000s on Muppet Tonight, where they kind of brought some other ones up. But he was in the original series. He would appear every now and then.
Really minor then, right?
He was. I think he premiered in the Vincent Price episode of the original Muppets.
That would make sense, because that character is basically doing Vincent Price.
He was just like a side. There were some puppets that like were on the side and didn't really do much, and then as time went on, they got more characterization to themselves.
So we have Trevor, and those are probably the 3 biggest characters. That's the thing, is none of them are the main character. Yeah, because we're just jumping around between small plot points. There is, what's the elephant's name?
I do not remember his name. I love him because he's just, it's just funny how I'm pretty sure he's supposed to be a one-on-one for Fozzie the Bear, especially during the bit where he's thrown on stage to perform and then he gets heckled. Is very much like a classic Fozzie the Bear sketch from the Muppet Show. But this man, he starts out with these little pets.
Sid is the
Sid. He ends up accidentally killing his act, because he has almost like a jumping flea act, but with like the little fuzz balls.
They look like the Tribbles from Star Trek almost.
Yes, exactly like that.
Yes. So those get like crushed. I'll tell you, I have never seen, even in something like that's trying to like be darkly comedic like this, blood and guts come out of a puppet. It's so wrong, because like that's the thing, is you see a puppet and I'm like, even if I threw it full force at the wall, well, then it would just compress on itself, and then like there's no.
The way they do the puppet gore is so great, because it feels not to say like natural, but it feels natural to that world. It's like, it makes sense what's happening, but I would have never imagined this happening.
There's such a visual disconnect because there's the scene where he's trying to train the kind of like the tribble fleas, whatever they are, and a barrel rolls over them. That's what crushes them as they're like hopping in a hallway. And you see one shot of like the fluffy little thing, and then the reverse of like the obviously it's a different puppet.
Yeah.
The kind of flattened one. And there's this visual dissonance because you're like, I just watched something react to physical stimulus in the form of being crushed differently than my brain thinks it should have.
Yeah.
It's weird that it responded that way, you know?
Speaking of gross, we actually, there's like 3 more characters that I think kind of share like the main character kind of archetype.
In as much as any character can. Yeah.
One of them, before we get to the gross ones, is one of my favorites just because he's like, he doesn't have like a 1-for-1 in like classic Muppets, but he would be what Walter from the Jason Segel would be nowadays.
Robert or Wobbert.
He's just an adorable little hedgehog, and I love his storyline of being like too serious into the role because he's straight out of like acting school. His love life, he meets a woman, woos her, gets engaged, breaks off the engagement, and then saves her, all within the span of rehearsing for a show starting at like noon to the show that later that night at like 7. And he's just such a funny character because he's supposed to be like the pure point of view. Out of everyone, he's like the one who's like, I don't do drugs.
Yeah, and he talks in this
how
like,
dare you drink? He like, a very babyish tone. And I don't know. He's so entertaining to watch on film because it's such a juxtaposition of what's happening.
Yeah, it is. You keep expecting something really bad to happen to him because comedically that would make the most sense.
Yeah.
Right? Is for the innocent to walk in and then just be corrupted and destroyed.
And they do make attempts to put him in situations where it feels like you should be corrupted by this.
Nothing bad ever even really happens to him.
Well, he's there for the whole flashback scene with the frog. That's him listening to the story the entire time.
That's the thing is,
and then he watches his girlfriend who has just been roofied be assaulted by Trevor the rat.
Yeah. That guy's no good.
He gets yelled at by the director constantly. He gets put in the knife throwing act after the knife thrower accidentally killed his original assistant.
Yeah.
Like there's stuff, they put him in situations where I feel like he should turn cynical like the rest. And he kind of just keeps this like rose tinted attitude about everything.
It's that he gets out of it either, through his own willful ignorance or through just not having witnessed an entire event. Just early enough to not be turned cynical by everything that he sees. So he ends with, the kind of rose-tinted belief in the rightness and the magic of what he's doing.
Yeah.
But we have Robert, and then the other one, unless I'm forgetting another, is the rabbit Harry.
Yeah.
Who
and the fly. I feel like
the fly is like a pretty big element of the Harry.
They have their own
fly.
FW. That's so fucking funny. FW Fly and Harry. They, out of all the plots, because there's like 6 plots going on at the same time, all the other plots kind of interweave and go in and out of each other, in my opinion. Theirs, I feel like the most separate. Because Harry's kept in his own room almost the entire time.
Almost no influence on the rest of the plots until the very end.
Yeah, and even then, it's like very little, like a couple characters from the other plot lines have to come and help clean up this plot line.
Yes.
But they are also, I think the reason they're so separated is I think they're also the grossest parts.
It's really nasty.
Film.
So Harry, you meet him like sleeping with other rabbits or animals, whatever.
Well, he first does they do like a nice little like the Muppets intro, and he's in there where it shows like he's the technical like star of the show. Where in my opinion, he's like more of the Kermit 1-for-1, and then the frog is like also like the two of them.
Yeah, he makes sense.
It's almost like this is like Kermit as the way we perceive him at the beginning of the show, and the way like they kind of. Because he deals with the media.
As the audience is supposed to perceive him, yes.
But on the background, it's very much just like star show going through something.
Yes. And it's so insensitive as to just, it doesn't even come off offensive so much as it is just really stupid. They never verbalize it. They just refer to it as a fatal disease or the big one.
Yeah.
What they're very clearly alluding to is that he has some sort of rabbit version of HIV/AIDS.
They do say later on that it's a sexual disease, but that's like I think the closest they get.
The closest they get to being explicit about is saying they're like, oh, you caught it through sex. We need a list of your sexual partners, that sort of thing. only it's rapidly accelerated.
Yeah.
He's developing like big pussy sores all over his face.
And they're exploding on like
Yes.
mirrors and stuff.
And FW Fly is this oversized fly who is breaking into his dressing room, harassing him constantly, saying like, "Uh-oh, the big star of the show, he's sick. I'm going to get a big scoop here. I'm sending this out to press."
He basically, which I think is the funniest bit, is the stage manager who's a worm, who's a lovely English worm. He's one of my favorite characters too.
Yes.
I like the ones that are very like sweet in this.
I'll try and find Arthur the worm.
Yeah, Arthur describes him as a muckraker, where basically he's literally like a journalist who just gets down and dirty. And
there's a scene where he eats shit. He's hiding in a toilet. It
comes out of nowhere. Literally, Harry's in the bathroom checking on himself because he's
starting to see the sickness.
He hears a voice. He goes to the toilet, and you just see this already disgusting looking fly puppet shoveling, and you can see bits of corn and like it looks like a chili that they threw in the toilet.
I might cut this out because I do think that like when I'm listening to podcasts, I'll just hear someone start talking about something gross, and like while I'm listening to podcasts, I'm like doing things in my life.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like doing dishes or just like eating a quick lunch. And I hate that now we're going to be that.
All right, let me clean it up. Let's say, so Harry goes in the bathroom. He's checking on himself.
And nothing weird happens.
He sees someone recycling a meal.
Yeah. You could show this scene to a kid. Please oh my God, don't do that.
That would be so many therapy bills.
Yes. So
that plot on its own is just, it's the grossest part of the film.
Because
both develop
for its own sake.
Yeah. Both are developing, and like the puppets are literally the Harry puppet, which I think is really interesting from like a practical look wise, is degrading in front of you. Like you see it slowly each time. It's a new puppet that has worse and worse symptoms being shown.
Yes.
And then the comedic payoff is just like, it turns out he just had like rabbit pox.
They called it like, rabbit pox or bunny flu. It was one of the two.
So one of those, something like very minor.
And then we'll reveal how that ends in a second. But so we actually didn't touch on Sid the elephant. Actually it's a very, very simple bit. He has one of the dancers who is like a chicken.
Yeah.
Which actually kind of makes him a bit of a gonzo.
That's what I was saying. He's like a mixture, I think, of Fozzie and Gonzo with the way they wanted to perform, and then the chicken relationship.
And there's a chicken who is insistent that her baby is his.
Yeah.
And he says, "No, it's not. You sleep with everybody on the show. It's not mine." And then the reveal that the baby is a elephant chicken hybrid is the funniest shit.
It is just. And Arthur's there the entire time. And Arthur's like one of the straight men of the whole film. And like his reaction, I think his line literally is he looks down at the baby with like it's crying with its elephant nose, like
and it's
wiggling
like chicken
about.
Feet kicking.
And he just looks up and goes, "Sid, it's got your eyes."
Yeah, it's very bizarre. And so all of these plots are just kind of like happening together. They're just like being woven in or out, without any real sense of balance. None of them are being given importance over each other until at the end, Mr. Bletch, who has been cheating on Heidi, with whom he has a relationship. He's cheating on her with a younger woman with whom he plans to replace her in the show. Tells her after the network says this is successful, "I'm getting rid of you. You're old. You're fat. We don't want you in the show anymore." And she, after attempting and failing to kill herself twice, sees the woman shit that Bletch is cheating on her with.
Not even sees.
She like wanders into a room.
The woman, literally, Heidi has a gun
like
down
in
her mouth.
It's an automatic machine gun,
and she's failing.
A bandolier of bullets.
Bandolier bullets. She has a string trying to pull the trigger, and she's failing at it. And the mistress comes in, walks into the room, grabs a pair of panties that are sitting on the chair. In the background of the shot, you just see Heidi with also another thing I need to mention. The eyes of these puppets are so good. The way they move around and blink is you watch the eyes of Heidi, watch the rat, squirrel, cat woman walk through, and the cat literally stops and goes, "Oh, don't let me stop you."
Yeah, she taunts her a little bit, which kind of is just enough to push her over the edge to go on a killing spree and murder everybody backstage and much of the audience.
Yeah.
I think
Basically, she commits a mass hooting.
a mass shooting. Yes.
Well, I don't want to be careful. YouTube sometimes picks up on some of those stuff.
A mass
hooting.
Mass hooting. There are no owls in this film. Just on the subject of hooting.
The baker was an owl.
Oh, the baker is. You're right. Yes, I'm funny. I'm looking at like a list of like characters by voice actor. That one is the one where they don't. The character's just called the baker. It's not Baker the owl or the owl baker. It's just the baker. So I forgot what animal that one was. But yeah, she goes through and kind of resolves all of these plots just by shooting at everybody.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, I think two plots resolve that don't involve everyone dying, but everything else just involves everyone blowing up. Robert gets to walk away with his girlfriend.
Robert, yeah.
Also, if you want to go watch the film, don't let us spoil it for you. We should set this at the top. Like, I feel like either listen to the podcast or watch the film and then listen to the podcast. You should go into this very like.
I've deliberated over this before, and I really think that if you see an hour-long podcast titled Meet the Feebles, and you start it and you get more than halfway through it and you're like, what the hell? They spoiled the movie?
Yeah.
I really do think that one's on you, man.
Yeah. I will say, going into Meet the Feebles, you should watch it blind. You should not know anything going into it. I know it's too late to say, maybe just watch it first.
Yeah.
Cut that out. Put it at the beginning with no context.
No context. Watch it first. And then that's it. That's and then we'll throw that in, and then it'll just sink right into
me being sweaty.
Yes. That's okay. We're all look. It's a summer in the city, but I'm personally really glad that it's hot. We cannot talk about weather in New York City on this.
Yeah,
we can't do it. But yes, all the plots kind of get resolved during the broadcast of the show.
Robert, who has broken off his engagement because he thought
he thought he was being cheated on, basically.
But in reality, she was being assaulted because she'd been drugged. He saves his fiance from being killed.
Yes.
The elephant man, Sid, he gets shot saving his baby, which I think is also not to be morbid, but the mother gets shot.
Yes.
And they have a funny bit where, because she's a chicken, her head gets shot off, but her body keeps running around in the background. Yes. And I think she even like whispers out one last "you bastard" as he accidentally squishes her head as he goes to save the baby, showing there's going to be a relationship there.
Yes.
And they give us a little bit of story at the end.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Maybe craziest thing in the entire movie is what happens during the credits. We'll get to that momentarily. But yeah, so Sid kills the mother accidentally by saving the baby. Robert gets away with his love. Harry, after getting a call from his doctor and finding out that that what he thought was rabbit HIV/AIDS is actually a particularly nasty case of, you said rabbit pox?
Yeah.
And then running out of the room saying, I'm so happy, is immediately shot in the face.
He's the first one that's the mistress is obviously the first one to die in this mass hooting.
Mm-hmm.
But he's the first one that's the nonsensical like first kill, because he comes out so happy and he just gets blown. And you don't like just see it take place off screen. You watch a lot of these puppets get blasted away. You see blood spurt out.
Yes.
Trevor, I think he has the worst of it, where you see his body literally pieces flying off it as they continually shoot him up, which is very satisfying because he is the most like, I hate him throughout the film. I hate every time he's on screen. He makes me so uncomfortable.
It's good to have somebody that like the movie is on your side. Like, this guy sucks.
Yeah.
And so just to see him, like, the closest there is to any like heroic catharsis moment is when Robert is like, I'm gonna save my love and I'm gonna kill this guy, which involves what is it? Let's see. So when I'm trying to figure out the chronology here, Heidi finally gets out to the stage, kills everybody on stage. And she sees sitting up in a Statler and Waldorf-esque position is Mr. Bletch.
Yeah.
Who he tries to talk her down. She shoots him. He's dying. He's shot. And he
falls over the balcony onto the stage.
And he tells her, like, I still loved you. And then while she's distracted by that, then yes, Trevor the rat comes in. And as he's about to shoot her,
He does shoot her, but misses.
Yes, it's as he's shooting at her, Wobbert, like Tarzan style, swings in on a rope, attacking Trevor with enough time for Heidi to then pick her gun back up, kill him, and then Bletch.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember how the other plot lines resolve themselves.
So
is that everything?
That's because then Sid walks away with his baby. Robert and his fiance
Get
are
married.
fine. Heidi has she pretty much ends. There's this one song she was singing throughout the whole show
that she asks
Garden of Love.
Arthur
she asks
the worm
Arthur to just because
to
the
play
cops
the music
you can
for
hear them
her
coming
as the sirens are going.
And
in the
she
background.
sings as like the cops come in and you hear the sirens and you just see this massacre of puppets all around them. Just one thing I want to bring up is one other section that we kind of skipped over. I just need to bring up as a fact that it doesn't feel so out of place that this happens where a puppet goes crazy and shoots, because there's so much other out of pocket like stuff that happens. One of my favorite bits, and I was laughing, I was in tears the first time this happened, is they spend like 10 to 15 minutes in a Vietnam flashback.
Yeah.
That involves nothing to do with the show except for the backstory of why the frog does drugs. And it is so fucking funny that it's just it's basically, I think the Vietnam fighters are represented by like weasels, I believe, or woodchucks. And that type of animal. And then on the other side, the US soldiers are all like frogs and toads.
Yes.
And it's just they're in this outdoors in the forest. At one point, it looks like a abandoned train yard, shooting at each other. They get kidnapped by Charlie, and there's a whole segment of like the frog being tortured. One of his companions gets it. It's head
like
on
a
spike.
POW camp. Yes.
Yeah, it is just such an insane part of this film that you don't expect going into it. Like, oh, this is the direction we might go in.
Yes, I want to reference like this. The visual language of this sequence in particular is an example of like why I think this is a better version than something like Happy Time Murders.
Yeah.
Because it actually presents you with interesting visual ideas of how things like gore would look in a puppet world.
Yeah.
Like the head on the spike actually might be the best example of it, because it is a mixture of kind of like what looks like flayed skin in the form of felt, but with like the exact right amount of kind of like bloody gooiness on the inside.
And then it had like bedazzled little bits as well.
Yes. Yes, that's the thing, is it looks somewhere half between a sequence and light twinkling off of wet blood. It is, and it's like kind of one of the craziest like images in the entire movie.
They put so much effort into the art design of this. The fact that there's a lot of segments, I feel like they bring these heavily designed puppets or designs that like probably took forever to build and make, and then they're barely on screen for that long. One of the ones I could think of is there's this whole sequence where the producer is going off because the guy he buys his drugs from gave him borax instead of cocaine.
Yeah.
So he has to go get it from the docks and kind of like interrupt the drug deal.
Mhm.
And one of the largest puppet in the film is this mob boss called Mr. Big, and he's just giant whale. And you see him on screen for maybe 5 minutes, even that at most. And he looks so intricately designed. You go through his insides, and
they kill him by driving a car into his mouth, through his intestines and out his ass.
Exactly.
And the car, by the way, comes out like fine, like literally not a dent on it.
And literally, you could tell there was so much that went into that sequence, like in the background, like how much they had to design it, how they had to make it safe for a car to go through, how they had to make it look good, how they had to make Mr. Big.
Oh, I honestly
talk.
assumed that was a miniature.
The fact that I think the one before the car actually goes, where it's sitting there and the puppet pops up, I think that's just a really big, large practical puppet. It has what looks like very loose frameworks.
I meant the interior shot.
The
you see it driving through intestines.
I think parts of that were actually like on a soundstage.
I'm looking at the car. I'm like, you would like rip up the chassis of it. Like
Yeah.
it wouldn't be intact
That's
because it's
fair.
like over like an uneven, bumpy, like downward
I
hill.
would love because I know he's doing documentaries now. If he did a behind the scenes documentaries about just the Feebles, because I'd love to see like how they did some of this stuff.
Well, he loves to restore old footage. Like if you've seen his movie They Shall Not Grow Old, he takes like damaged footage from World War I,
Yeah,
and restores it like in a like using like some generative technology, but like also just like just trying to apply effects to it so that it looks more legible. And I wonder if he would just go back and do that with behind the scenes footage of making his own fuck puppet film.
I would love to see that because it's just such a for where he is now. Because he is such like a mainstream director.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone knows who, even if you haven't seen Lord of the Rings, you know Peter Jackson. You know his work.
Yes, he is the rare director who I think his name means something to general audiences.
Yeah. But if you bring up, barely anyone knows Meet the Feebles. And I think it's really funny. One of the best examples of like Meet the Feebles is such like a hidden gem, for lack of a better term, and his like
it's
filmography
a real obscurity.
Is there was a Muppet show that just came out Disney Plus in the past year about the band Muppets Mayhem, and I saw this show before I watched Meet the Feebles, and I had to, as soon as I watched Meet the Feebles, I had to go back and double check. Like I heard exactly what happened, but basically there's like the whole show is about the band and them trying to be like a bigger band with like a manager and something separate from the Muppets. And one of the episodes is all about making their own documentary because all the big bands have documentaries about them.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have Peter Jackson come in for a scene because he just did the Let It Be documentary.
Get Back was what it was called.
Get Back.
Yes.
The Get Back documentary. And so they're like, oh, he's going to make it. And there's a quick throwaway line where he walks in, Animal like runs up to him, gives him a hug, and everyone's like passing respects because in that world, they're friends with Peter Jackson. And he's like, oh, I can't even remember the last time I hung out with you guys. And one of the Muppets is like, I think it's when we all went out to get drinks and we hung out with the Feebles. Yeah. And the fact that and if we cut this for a reel please show the clip real quick of just that quick line of like Dr. Teeth or Peter Jackson saying to Muppets like the words the Feebles. The fact that it made it past Disney censors, even for Disney Plus. Yeah. Because the rest of the show is very PG. Like they touch on like little things like, oh, they're definitely like all these characters definitely like on drugs and stuff. Mm-hmm. But like the fact that they not only mention this film that I think is unrated, has so much like anti-family friendly stuff in it, and it just gets by the censors. No one really questions the line. No one double checks. Barely anyone I saw after the episode went up for the people like I'm in the Muppet community. Not even a lot of people brought up like that line. We don't have to go deeper into that. Please don't let us go deeper into that.
We do not have time to delve into the statement.
That is a whole podcast on itself.
It's just that you just threw off, like, obviously, like me within the Muppet community, the casualness with which you just...
It's so crazy that not only were they brought in, but the Feebles were then, as someone who's like, last time I was on was for the comic book one for Howard the Duck. And talking about like universes, the Muppets have their own like quote unquote universe. And the fact that the Feebles are canon and exist in the universe of a Disney owned property is weird.
Even if it's just a throwaway line.
Even just a throwaway, it's crazy. It's so funny that was slightly my introduction of like, I want to learn a little bit more because around the time of that episode is when the few people that were talking about it posted a clip of the Feebles on TikTok. Mm-hmm. And they're like, you can watch the whole thing on YouTube for free. And I was like, fuck, I want to do that. And I was hanging out with my girlfriend like 2 days later. And I was like, hey, we got some edibles from a respectable dispensary in New York City where it's legal.
Yes.
Just want to preface that. And I'm like, do you want to watch this crazy puppet film?
They're not going to like extradite you to Iowa, by the way, just because somebody watched this there. That's not how that's going to happen.
Look, I just saw Civil War, Alex Garland's Civil War. I don't know what's going to happen in a couple of years.
Pretty okay movie.
It's a pretty okay movie. Yeah. But basically,
I don't know if you know this, but being a war journalist might numb you to war.
Yeah, that's crazy, right?
Yeah, it's just I didn't.
I also love how all the marketing did not talk about what the the actual film
No,
was going to be.
it's actually-
Instead,
it's-
they hyped up the background of the film, which you don't learn anything about.
No, you don't. That's honestly like there's probably like a really interesting like novel in there. I don't know if that really makes sense as a movie.
Yeah, it's pretty much like, yeah, maybe as like a mini series on like HBO for like 3 episodes.
It's yeah. I don't know. I actually like think that movie is like a pretty effective little thriller.
I think
that
it's really good for what it is. I just don't think it was advertised as what it was.
I think that yes, they market it a little differently than from what it actually is. Not a bad movie though.
No. I still enjoyed it. I enjoyed what was going on. I would have loved something separate about the interesting parts of why I went to go see the movie.
Yes. I feel like the line on that movie beforehand was everyone was like, this movie is dividing audiences. It's driving people insane. And I'm like, I don't know. It's a pretty good.
It barely gets political. It very much is like,
no, and when it does,
or like even comments on like U.S. politics as much.
When it does, it's so like broad and obvious in its statements.
Yeah,
it's not like I'm like you're just restating like you're just restating what things are. That you're not even restating commentary that people.
Yeah, and they keep very like middle ground too. Like they try not to go like too crazy on either side.
Yeah, that's the thing is they do this kind of like. They do this new version of both sidesing where they do like, well, neither side because everything's bad, right?
Yeah.
And it's it's going back to a little bit to tie this back in, the idea that you said like this generation's sense of humor, this generation being young millennials and Gen Z, is there's like a line of hopelessness through it.
Yeah, I think the best thing I could think of like that type of humor is like so prevalent nowadays than like a while ago. I think maybe a little over a year ago, we were supposed to go see the Mario Brothers live action movie.
Yeah.
And you unfortunately couldn't make it last minute.
I think I got COVID. I don't know.
Something happened where you handed the tickets off to me. And one of the most infamous parts of that movie, which back in the day, obviously like early 2000, it was very much like, ooh, there's a reason no one like watched the movie for a while.
Yeah.
Was the Super Mario Brothers transport part of like the Koopa's world into New York City, and you see them like attack and blow up the Twin Towers. And in the audience at the theater I was in, everyone was dying because of the irony of it. Because we all know like what happened soon after. And it's like stuff like that. I feel like this generation has become so like kind of hard to that it's easier to laugh at stuff like that.
The life cycle of like when it is on the subject of Peter Jackson, when it is no longer in bad taste to mock or point out the ridiculousness of something. 9/11 is a little over 20 years ago, and I do feel like, especially living in New York, it's a thing that many young people are like. I mean, now like young adults are people who weren't born when 9/11 happened, but people will joke about it really openly.
Yeah.
I mean, like with January 6th, I remember like being really upset that day because it was really upsetting to witness it happen. I think I was laughing at memes about it by like January 9th.
Yeah.
I think I was like immediately like, well, I don't know. What am I supposed to do except for to make fun of this thing and laugh at it because no one is addressing the problems that allowed it to happen. So the best thing I can do is get some entertainment value out of it.
Going back to the Feebles, I'd love to know what the reaction was from like the original audience of like the whole Vietnam section.
I did not do any like research into this because this was something you had presented to me. I'm seeing here it has a 72% on Rotten Tomatoes from
that's actually not that bad.
25 critics. So that's the thing is that like it'll be like, oh yeah, but like it's just a bunch of like people with blogs, and and like as somebody who is basically doing just being a guy with a blog, except for in spoken instead of written version. I don't want to disparage the people too much, but like, yeah, I think that it's mostly people like you and me who are way after the fact, kind of exploring this thing.
Yeah.
As a curio of a bygone era, as opposed to like, I think that this is something that just was basically not released. I'm looking at it. It only got like a very like limited theatrical release in the United States.
That makes sense.
So I think that this was something that at the time, especially pre-internet era, critics were simply just not made aware of to trash it or to like it in the first place. You know,
I would have loved to be like in the theater though on like opening night to just see like the reactions
of people just like, not for me. I don't want
either that or if they'd like absolutely fucking loved it.
I mean,
at the time, because I would imagine like this probably premiered in New Zealand first.
Let's see here,
because it seems like it was a lot of when they're outdoors, a lot of the scenery feels like it's shot in New Zealand.
It was given its public premiere at a fantasy film festival in Hamburg in 1990, where it proceeded to get a limited theatrical release in Japan, Portugal. Like, that's the thing, is like, it would get in one country a year for a limited theatrical release. This is actually very funny. Just like every other month for the stretch of like 5 years or so, they're like, oh, it's in Japan, it's in Portugal, it's in the UK.
They must have had limited like film reels to travel around with.
It is probably literally just that we didn't have enough reels.
Yeah.
And also there's this movie can only ever have such limited appeal in the first place, because like, even if like a distributor is interested in taking it places, you can't sell this to a multiplex. You have to just take it to a small theater and be like, can you give us 2 weeks, please? Can you just give us a 2-week run? I
would love to. So is this the first time you've done a podcast on a movie that you didn't go to a screening to? You just went to someone's like apartment?
No, we've done a couple others. There was one time actually you were sick, we canceled, and I did American Movie with Alex Campo.
Yes. Okay.
We've started doing. We're kind of like in this like little mini season here, and I guess I should just go ahead and address it on Mike. Now we are changing up the format to cover movies in a mini series format. Right now, we're just kind of in a floating period of guest choices. And we've done a couple movies like that. They're like, oh, somebody's like, I want to come on and defend this thing that I think unfairly has a bad reputation. But we're kind of switching up format a little bit. So we're going to pivot away from doing episodes that are based around a specific screening. Just frankly, because most of the screenings I was going to are repertory screenings that are often one night only exhibitions. It was making it incredibly logistically difficult for people who wanted to be on the show just due to, like very limited availability, because they have to be available that night and then for a separate record. And so we're kind of switching things up, and it'll also allow us to go like more of a deep dive on, like on subjects that are interesting to us or that we kind of like want to talk to multiple people about. And we'll be revealing more stuff about that on social media here soon. Sorry, I didn't intend to.
I was just going to say that
alcove.
I would love to have gone to a screening for this, but looking it up in New York, which I think is probably like, it's like the capital of the world, quote unquote. And if you can barely find a screening here, I think I looked it up and there was one screening like 3 years ago in Long Island of Meet the Feebles. Yeah. And that's the closest one I could find into like the tri-state area. It's like, it does feel like also the perfect film to sit on your couch, find the YouTube video, which is also like, you just search up Meet the Feebles. We found
they're like, it's in 4K. And I was like, this movie has 1 to 1.5 Ks in it. It doesn't have that many Ks.
It looks like restored almost.
I like, there's literally 5 minutes in. I was like, I feel like an asshole. This thing is amazing. Yeah, this looks really good.
It feels like it was also shot and edited well. The color correction looks great. Like, it looks so nice.
It doesn't have that weird muddiness. It wasn't pixelated at all.
Yeah.
So if you go on YouTube, you can probably find videos of it, because I imagine this thing, nobody is interested in monetizing it.
If you look up Meet the Feebles, the first, like not even Meet the Feebles full movie, just Meet the Feebles. From what I remember from the search, the first one and the third one are both full length copies of the film just on YouTube.
Yes. But that's Meet the Feebles, and I'll tell you this, I'm very glad I've seen it. This has kind of been one that, it's one of those movies that I've always loved the idea of having seen, and it's just kind of sits on my to-do list for a really long time, because it's a hard thing to like, I've talked about movies like this before. For one reason or another, they're a hard sell on a Tuesday night.
Yeah.
It's hard to be like, I have work today and I have to work tomorrow. We're home and we have enough time to watch something. How about this? And it's one where if you do a little bit of cursory looking into it, it's very easy. for you or for your partner, whoever you live with, to be like something like kind of normal, please. Like, I want to get less stressed.
I will say, you're the third person I've sat down and watched it with.
Yes.
And every time, the people I've watched with, my girlfriend and one of my best friends, Sebastian, who's been on, they both stated that they very much do not regret watching the film. They love the experience.
It's nothing else. This is a really...
Nat, I will say though, Nat has decided she never wants to see the film again. She's glad she saw it the one time. Never wants to see it again. Doesn't want to see the scenes with the fly and Harry. Doesn't want to see, like, be in those uncomfortable Trevor scenes. And then Seabass, on the other hand, me and him are trying to get my roommate, Kyle McIntyre. Yeah. Which, if you're listening to this, Kyle, we need to watch this together. Yeah. I hope you're not, because I want to show you it before you know anything about the plot. Most of why
you came on was so that you could get some published version to bully Kyle into watching this.
Yes. Which I hope this is a real right now, because I'm going to look straight in the camera and I'm going to go, well, Kyle Thomas McIntyre, please. I know you're studying for the LSAT. After that, let us sit down and let's watch Meet the Feebles together, because this film is calling you.
Okay, now that you've doxed your friend, I want to ask one. Oh, also, by the way, my guest today is Bobby Martin, returning to the podcast.
Yeah. Hi, nice to meet you. Muppet Bobby Boy.
Yeah, Muppet Bobby Boy, my guest. Bobby, do you have anything to plug?
So I will say, tying into variety shows. Yes. Is this episode going to come out end of May?
This is end of May, early June.
Okay, so it should be in time. Look up the Skeeter Stevenson Variety Hour. Their Pride show should be in either the next week or the following week. Yes. I know it's mid-June.
Yes.
If you want to watch a good actual variety show and you're in the Brooklyn, New York City area, yes, come on out to Pine Box Rock Shop. I do a lot of technical stuff for them, behind the scenes editing stuff. And it might not be Meet the Feebles level, but at times it can get close to that ridiculousness.
Yes.
I also have, if you're into Magic the Gathering, I have an account where I do special artworks for cards called Nerd of the Coast. I don't currently do commissions at the moment just because I'm not perfectly set up. But if you want to just see, like, we do interactions with fans every Sunday to get suggestions.
You're always open for conversations.
Yeah, on our TikTok, we have a series where I take suggestions on what the artwork for a certain card should be. Yeah. So there are ways to be interacted. And I'm not saying I'll never do commissions, but it's something we're not at yet. But if you come and you're interested, keep an eye on, and we might be there at one point.
It's a good social media follow, if nothing else.
Exactly. And if you watch Meet the Feebles from this, please drag in other people that don't know what's going on, and tag us.
Tag us. Tell us what they thought of it. And we're always just like looking for more interaction with, because I really do hope that this is an impetus for people to watch movies that we talk about. I do hope that this entices people too.
And I will say, just to make sure that, because I want to force you to do this on social media every time. This time, instead of Muppet Bobby Boy or Bobby Muppet Boy, Muppet Boy Bobby or Feeble Boy Bobby.
Okay, we'll just continue iterating a little bit, and we'll change a little bit. So one more time so we have it clean.
It's either Muppet Boy Bobby
with hashtags.
Hashtag Muppet Boy Bobby or hashtag Feeble Boy Bobby.
Cool.
You decide.
With that being said, as always, this has been Bad First Impression. I am your host, Devin Warner. You can find the show on all socials at BFI Pod. Please like, comment, review, subscribe, depending on your platform. We're on YouTube. We are on all, podcasting platforms, and we're on all socials. Look out for announcements for change in format for the show coming soon, because that should be, by the time this comes out, we might have even announced it by now, or it's coming probably within the next week or so. So I might as well just give myself that deadline on mic now. You can find me personally on social medias at WhatIfDevin. And until next time, do we have a quote to go out on?
Meet the Feebles. Meet the Feebles.
Please don't DMCA us.
Meet the Feebles. Meet the Feebles.